the financial problems facing our councils. They're all about to set their council tax rates. I think some are going to push through rises of 9–10%. I had a story this morning about Glasgow City Council. Now, their black hole is, I think, between 40 and 50 million pounds. And there's a couple of things that are on the table. I should say there's no final decision on it. It could change, but they're looking at 5% council tax rise and also an accounting trick, which will mean they have to borrow about 30 million pounds. And that's to fill a black hole that is largely caused by the homelessness crisis in the city, which is in itself not, would I say largely or mainly, a huge contributing factor in that is the refugee homelessness situation, where you've got a huge increase of refugees granted leave to remain, applying for homelessness assistance in Glasgow. So, John, Glasgow again is facing a very difficult budgetary situation. Raising taxes and borrowing more in order to address this issue. You can see the optics in terms of the problems with that.
Yeah, I mean, anyone looking around, and this isn't just Glasgow, I think anyone looking about their community in any part of Scotland can see this kind of, anyone around our age can see this tragedy of towns where there used to be a library and a community centre and just sort of vibrant public services, swimming pools, and so much of this stuff is closed down just because councils have no money. In Glasgow, famously, they've had to mortgage off the art galleries, their own city chambers, various sporting venues. So the crisis in local authority funding is real, and it's really tragic, I think, for our cities and communities. If you're looking for the root cause of that, probably you need to go back in history and look at the decision to sell off council houses, which was this huge income for local authorities in the past. They clearly are genuinely up against it, and now Glasgow is this added issue of having I think probably genuinely to do the right thing, said, yes, we're a welcoming city, we'll take as many refugees as possible, but the money just isn't there to adequately house them. And I think that the problem now is that you can end up creating, if you do something like that without the resources to do it properly, then you could actually end up with a public backlash. So what do you do? Really, you've got to get more money from central government, or you've got to raise council tax. It looks like there is no extra money coming from central government, and so there's going to be more big council tax increases coming in the next sort of month or so, and people aren't going to like it. But what else can you do, really?
Ben, I mean, isn't it the case that if this plan was to get the green light, council tax rises and borrowing more in order to address the refugee homelessness crisis, I mean, Reform would pounce on that?
Reform would pounce on it. I would say that there is something that the Scottish government can do, and they can reinstate the local connection rule, which is the root cause of this is some have described it as virtue signalling. The decision taken in 2022 that anyone in Scotland at any local authority can apply for put in a homelessness application, and they must be put on the housing register, even if they don't have a connection to the area. Previously, you had to have a connection. You had to have family in the area. You had to have lived there previously. You had to have worked there previously. And the local connection rule went. The councils asked the Scottish government to reinstate it, and they've said no. And that's why you're getting people coming
the root cause. I mean, that is a factor, but I think if you look at it's a huge surge in the last few years, maybe 2 or 3 years. The biggest factor, I'm not saying abolishing local connections is not a factor. It is. The biggest factor is trying to close the asylum hotels. That is the Home Office is the main problem, not the only problem, but by closing the hotels, you're basically making asylum seekers destitute.
The hotels were
refugees destitute.
The hotels were only put in place during the pandemic. as an emergency stopgap measure. They were never designed before 2020. Asylum seekers didn't stay in hotels. It was put in during the pandemic, and they were always going to close. So this is,
No, I think the policy is fine. It's just that the Home Office has to make sure that they're not just like in trying to do that politically, they're not creating a huge problem for local councils in terms of their funding. There should be extra funding for councils in order to deal with a huge surge in applications from refugees.
But the surge is, a large part of it is due to the fact that refugees, say they're in Manchester, Birmingham, they've been given leave to remain, they're in Birmingham, and Birmingham Council's going, oh, you're going to have to stay in a housing shelter, we can't guarantee you a house. And lo and behold, travel up the West Coast main line, and there's a council that will guarantee you a home.
Yeah, so it's a combination of the Home Office policy and also Scotland's liberal homeless and housing laws. And the people who are having to pick up the tab are just ordinary Glaswegians in the form of higher council tax and maybe extra borrowing.